Welcome to the channel. Tonight, we uncover the truth behind one of history's most chilling mysteries. Seattle, Washington, the early 1980s. The city was riding the wave of the tech boom, Microsoft was rising in nearby Redmond, and the future seemed bright. But in the shadows of the Emerald City, a monster was hunting. Young women were disappearing from the streets of Seattle's South King County, prostitutes, runaways, drifters whose disappearances were often overlooked. By the time their bodies were found, the killer had already moved on. The Green River Killer was about to become America's longest serial killer hunt. In July and August 1982, two girls' bodies were discovered along the Green River in King County, Washington. The victims, 27-year-old Wendy Stevens and 16-year-old Debbie McCown, had been sexually assaulted and strangled. Their bodies were found in the same general area, suggesting a connection. Investigators recognized they might be dealing with a serial killer, but they had no idea how prolific this killer would turn out to be. Over the next months and years, more bodies emerged. The Green River, the Snoqualmie River, gravel pits, remote roads, victims appeared throughout King County. The victims shared common characteristics. Young women, often prostitutes or hitchhikers, reported missing in Seattle or South King County. The killer was methodical, patient, and brutal. He strangled his victims, sometimes posing their bodies, always sexually assaulting them first. He was the definition of evil. In November 1982, Seattle Police and the King County Sheriff's Office formed the Green River Task Force, one of the largest serial killer investigations in American history. Detectives Dave Reichert and others devoted their careers to the case. The task force collected evidence, tracked missing persons reports, and built a profile of the unknown killer. They would work on the case for nearly 20 years. The Green River Killer claimed at least 49 confirmed victims, though the true number may be higher. The youngest was 13-year-old Cindy Smith. Others included Cynthia Hines, Patricia Osbrink, and many more. They were daughters, sisters, friends. Most were marginalized women, prostitutes, runaways, drug users, whose disappearances were initially given little priority. Each victim was a human being who deserved better than the fate that found them. For years, the Green River Killer case stalled. Physical evidence was collected: semen, hairs, fibers, but DNA technology was in its infancy. In 1987, investigators announced that DNA evidence linked multiple murders to a single perpetrator. This was groundbreaking. DNA had never been used to link serial killings in this way, but without a suspect to compare against, the DNA was a dead end. The task force needed more. Gary Ridgway was an ordinary man from a working-class background. He was a truck painter, a husband, a father. He lived in the Green River area. He had a history of visiting prostitutes, but for years, investigators did not focus on him. He did not fit the profile of a serial killer. In 1987, he was interviewed and released. It would be another 15 years before he was arrested. In 2001, Gary Ridgway was arrested and charged with the Green River murders. The case against him was overwhelming. DNA evidence matching samples from multiple victims, a confession to multiple murders, detailed knowledge of crimes that had never been publicly revealed. Ridgway had led investigators to bodies they didn't know existed. He had killed for years, hiding in plain sight, while the task force worked desperately to catch him. Gary Ridgway's trial was delayed for years as defense attorneys challenged the evidence. Eventually, Ridgway accepted a plea deal. He would plead guilty to 49 murders in exchange for life in prison without parole. He would never be executed. On December 18, 2003, Ridgway stood in court and described his crimes, the women he had killed, the methods he had used, the extent of his depravity. It was a confession that chilled a nation. In his confession, Gary Ridgway described picking up prostitutes, strangling them with his hands, and disposing of their bodies in remote locations. He admitted to targeting marginalized women who wouldn't be missed. He described his victims with disturbing detachment, referring to them as customers and prostitutes. He led investigators to remains they had never found. The scope of his crimes was horrifying. Critics questioned why it took nearly 20 years to catch Gary Ridgway. He had been a suspect early on, but was eliminated due to poor police work. He lived in the community. He had a record of visiting prostitutes, yet he was not seriously investigated until 2001. The failures of the Green River investigation The failure to arrest Ridgway earlier, the loss of evidence, the bureaucratic failures, became part of the story. Detective Dave Reichert became synonymous with the Green River case. He spent nearly 2 decades pursuing the killer, refusing to let the case go cold. He became sheriff of King County, then a member of Congress. His persistence was legendary. Reichert never gave up, and his dedication eventually led to Ridgway's arrest. He was the face of the investigation, the detective who refused to quit. The families of Green River victims endured decades of uncertainty. They watched suspects come and go. They attended memorials and vigils. They pushed for answers. When Ridgway was finally arrested, many families felt relief, but also knew pain, learning the details of their loved ones' deaths, seeing the man responsible for their loss. The family's suffering was immeasurable. One crucial factor in solving the Green River case was evidence preservation. Task force members had stored thousands of evidence samples for decades, knowing that DNA technology would eventually advance. When that technology arrived, they were able to compare evidence from the crime scenes to DNA from Gary Ridgway. The preservation of evidence was a triumph of foresight. The DNA evidence in the Green River case was revolutionary. For the first time, DNA from crime scenes was used to link multiple murders and identify a serial killer. This case became a model for how DNA could solve cold cases. The forensic advances pioneered in the Green River investigation would be applied to cases around the world. Gary Ridgway remains incarcerated at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. He has been denied parole repeatedly. He has participated in victim impact statements, expressing remorse, though whether his remorse is genuine remains debated. He has provided information about additional victims and crimes. He lives on, a reminder of the evil that can hide in ordinary people. Some Green River victims were never identified. Their bodies were found, but their names remain unknown. DNA Doe Project and other organizations continue working to identify these victims, giving names to the nameless. The unidentified victims represent the most marginalized, women whose disappearances were not reported, whose families never came forward. The Green River itself became a symbol of the murders. Flowing through King County, the river was where many victims were found, their bodies disposed of in its waters or along its banks. The river was both a crime scene and a memorial, a place of sorrow and remembrance. Today, the river continues to flow, indifferent to the horror that occurred on its shores. Seattle's community responded to the murders with fear and action. Prostitutes organized to demand protection. Residents pushed for better police work. The case highlighted the vulnerability of marginalized women and the failures of society to protect them. The community's response was both protective and political, demanding change. The Green River case attracted intense media coverage. True crime books, documentaries, and podcasts have explored the case in detail. The story of America's longest serial killer hunt captured public imagination. Gary Ridgway became a figure of horror, a reminder that monsters can look like ordinary men. The media coverage shaped public perception of the case. The Green River case taught law enforcement valuable lessons about serial killer investigations. Evidence preservation became paramount. DNA technology was revolutionized. Task force organization improved. The mistakes made in the early investigation were studied and corrected. The case became a teaching tool for future investigators. The Green River victims were primarily marginalized women, prostitutes, runaways, drug users. Their deaths exposed the indifference of society to those on the margins. Critics argued that if the victims had been wealthy white women, the investigation would have been prioritized differently. The case highlighted systemic failures. A memorial was established in King County to honor the Green River victims. The memorial includes the names of identified victims and space for the unidentified. It is a place of remembrance and healing, a tribute to lives lost. Families visit the memorial to honor their loved ones. Seattle has transformed since the Green River murders. The tech boom has made the city wealthy and influential. The South King County areas where victims were found have changed. The city has grown and evolved, but the memory of the Green River Killer persists, a dark chapter in Seattle's history. In interviews, Gary Ridgway has discussed his crimes in disturbing detail. He has described his methods, his victims, his motivations. He has expressed remorse, though investigators remain skeptical. His interviews provide insight into the mind of a serial killer, though they cannot explain why he became what he was. Gary Ridgway has claimed responsibility for additional murders beyond the 49 to which he pleaded guilty. He may have killed more than anyone realizes. The true extent of his crimes may never be known. Some victims remain undiscovered, their graves unmarked, their stories untold. Many investigators devoted their careers to the Green River case. Dave Reichert was the most famous, but dozens of detectives, forensic specialists, and support staff worked on the case for years. Their persistence paid off, catching one of America's most prolific killers. Their work saved future victims. The plea deal that spared Gary Ridgway the death penalty was controversial. Some families wanted execution. Others preferred the certainty of life imprisonment. The deal allowed Ridgway to avoid trial while providing details of his crimes. The controversy continues. Why did Gary Ridgway become a killer? How many victims were there really? Were there other killers operating in the area? These questions may never be fully answered. Ridgway's psychology remains mysterious. The full scope of his crimes may never be known. The 49 or more victims of the Green River Killer deserve to be remembered not as prostitutes or runaways, but as human beings. They had dreams, families, futures. Gary Ridgway took everything from them. In remembering them, we honor their lives and recommit to protecting the vulnerable. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share.